And thank you for inviting me to this acronym meeting, which is really nice to be here. I'm the Deputy Director of the Institute for Future Studies, but I have a background in the Cabinet offices. I'm a quantitative analyst, and I've been thinking about systems for quite a while now. I was invited here to talk a little bit of the future, but on the other hand, the future of this talk is very short, so I will concentrate on stuff that I think it's important to think about as a leader. Namely, how does the future look like, and some trends and some future for the welfare states. We are beginning to know how the society works. What type of organism is the society? And when we know what the society works, we also know that we cannot do exact predictions of the future. But why do we know this, and can we say something meaningful about the future anyway, despite the fact that we cannot do exact predictions? I think we can, and I was thinking I will explain a little bit about some of the wicked problems of tomorrow. Maybe you're familiar with the term wicked problem. Wicked problem is the problem that never goes away, so that none of our countries has actually solved, and that we are struggling with to solve, but we don't. We are richer, we are more healthy, we are actually quite happy, and so forth, but we cannot solve some of the problems because they are very old, and therefore we can also do a prediction, I think, about which problems will they be. And it's a lot of labor market issues, of course. It's not if you have a disability or a mental illness, but if you are young or if you have a immigrant background and stuff like that, that's always a problem in all our countries. Housing shortages, traffic jams and so forth, health problems, and also that we also injure people in the health services, for instance. But also the schools are not performing as well as we would like to, and mental health problem has increased during the last decades, actually from the 80s somewhere in Sweden at least. At the same time, we become very good. For the health services, for instance, we increased the 5-year survival rates, for instance, in various cancers or cardiovascular and stuff like that. So we are really good at some things. But we are also very poor acting on some other things. And what is it that makes it that we are so good at some things and we still have these wicked problems? Why cannot we solve these wicked problems? One problem with the problem solving is that none of the daily political discussions solve these issues. So we have a lot of discussion about private, public, state municipalities, and so forth, organization, resources, laws, rules, policies, and so forth. And we know from rather good research that that has a very low impact on what's happening. And one thing of thinking about this is, of course, that we come from very different countries, and we sort of solve the organizational issues, the financing issues and so forth very differently in all our countries, especially when it comes to healthcare, for instance. Despite this fact, we have all the same problems. So you cannot go to one country and say, wow, they have actually solved all these problems. Let's take this organizational form or these financial institutions or whatever it is that you see difference between us, and we implement it in our country, and voila, everything is solved. But basically, we have sort of the same issues in every country, despite the fact that the organizations, the laws, the policies, and also background in all the systems are quite different. So, same problems, quite different organizations, and therefore the correct answer to this question is that organizations isn't the main question or the main answer to our wicked problems. We think that this is complicated systems, and a complicated system is, for instance, a probably iPhone in this meeting, but smartphone. It's a complicated system, but still, no one knows how this actually works in detail. But we do know how to make predictions about it because it does the same thing every day. But mental health, for instance, or health services, or public health, or stuff like this, it's not a complicated system. It's much worse. It's a complex self-organizing system. And in a complex self-organizing system, there's a vast difference against a complicated system. In everyday language, we usually use complicated and complex as synonyms, but this is really not true. This is, from a more technical point of view, very different systems. One who has been thinking a little bit more about this is Dave Snowden, who was an IBM researcher looking into organizations in the US. And he says that there's well, sort of three different things that's organization types or phenomena types or something. Simple, complicated, and complex. Chaotic systems, you don't have much of a chaotic system because in a chaotic system there's no connection whatsoever between the inputs, your measures, and the outcomes. So that's a chaotic system. It's really random. So even if you, from time to other, really think that your everyday life is chaotic, it's probably just disorder in the middle from this more technical point of view. So disorder that we know about. But your patients, your societies, your organizations, they can be simple, complicated, or complex. And being a leader, you have to identify what you are working with. Are you working with a simple problem, simple phenomena, a complex one, or complicated? So if we would take an example of patients, for instance, a simple patient, that would be maybe a patient that has a tumor. You know what the tumor is, you know what the remedy is, the therapy, and you apply this therapy to the patient, and you know quite well with probabilities and so on how the patient will fare in this system. So that's a simple system. I mean, it's not simple in the meaning that it's banal or something, because it could be a very advanced technology and so forth, but it's simple in this meaning that it's deterministic. So when we think about systems, when we think about organizations, we almost always think about it as a simple deterministic system or an industrialized system. So many of the solutions come from the industry. And making silos, for instance, is required in a simple system, and that's a very good solution also. But it becomes a problem when your problems are complicated. If we go back to the patient, maybe a patient that with a backache goes to the general practitioner, for instance, and it could be a variety of reasons, of course. It could be a cancer again, of course, but it could also be a sore back in several medical ways that I don't know in English. But you can also have psychosocial problems, of course. You are getting worried about your son or daughter skipping school or something, and it turns out as a backache. Now, best practices, evidence, and stuff like that, it ceases to exist. You know nothing, because this is an everyday life problem. This is a complicated system where you have to have more data, you have to have more thinking. Maybe you could have a artificial intelligence that makes your decision easier, or that also maybe says, have you asked about this man or this patient's daughter and school results, for instance. But it could be worse. Again, it could be a complex patient, like an old lady living in a special nursery home. What happens if we take away drug number 10? We don't know. She'll probably get better, but we don't know. We have to experiment. We have to take away this drug and see what happens. Will this old lady live until Christmas? We don't know. There's no way to tell. It depends on all the different acting. The grandchilds, are they coming? The childs, are they coming visiting her? Is the food good? Is the view good? Is the weather good? And stuff like that. Everything this interacts as different agents on the forecast of her health for Christmas. So most of our problems that is wicked is actually complex rather than simple. But this is a really true important, that we have to do something to identify what sort of problem are we working with. Are we working with a simple deterministic problem? Then we can use silos, we can use specialization. We have a really good scale. It's grand scale is working better than a small scale, but in complex system, it's the other way around. There is no best organization. There is no best method, for instance, in complex systems. So we cannot take the best organization from another country, for another hospital or whatever, and put it into place in our place and hope for the good solution here. And today, I think we have the complicated system that we can relatively well handle deterministic systems and phenomena. For instance, some complicated matters like taxation works really well in Sweden. Actually, the taxation authority, the agency, is the most popular agency in Sweden. So that says something about the Swedish mentality, but also that they are working very well with doing their service levels and so forth. So we have a complicated society. We can do complicated stuff, and we have complicated solutions to complicated problems. We're really good at this. But Ashby's law from 1947 says that to control a system, to lead a system, you have to have the amount of information must be proportional to the system's complexity. So if we don't have this information, then we cannot do this. And up till now, I would say that we haven't been able to handle all the information that we need to have to handle complex systems. But now we're living in really exciting times with artificial intelligences and so forth. So I think we are on the verge of a society where we actually can handle complex matters. And I think the next level is the biological society. And one thing, of course, is that we can handle biology with CRISPR-Cas9, for instance, or genome sequences becomes cheap and so forth. And we have a lot of initiatives in research that connects behavior and DNA, for instance. But we're also beginning to understand that the wicked problems are complex, that is biological rather than simple or deterministic. And we are on the verge of actually inventing those new methods to handle complexity, simulations, artificial intelligence, and so forth, and big data. But then, of course, we have to redesign our institutions, and we have to think differently in these matters, because we cannot work in these silos anymore, and we have to connect the dots between society, but we can't do that manually because society is too complex. But we have to develop the system that actually can connect these dots. And we have actually a time limit here, because we have to do it before 2045, because then Ray Kurzweil, who is he's a futurist, inventor, and also head of Google's development department, and he says that by 2023, $1,000 will buy a computer with the same capacity as a human brain. By 2029, $1,000 buys a computer with the same capacity as 1,000 brains. And by 2045, $1,000 buys a computer a billion times the capacity of all human brains altogether. And this is where the singularity, he says, becomes, when we have the first computer that is aware and also will invent its successor, which is much more intelligent, and then we'll have an intelligent explosion in the machines. And Ray says that this is the last invention we have to do in humanity, because then this will be a godlike force that will solve all our problems. The opponents say that this is the last invention that mankind can do, because this computer will take over the world, kill us all, and then be Homo sapiens 2.0. So good luck before 2045 to you all. Thank you.